Good evening, church, and welcome to our good news time together. We are glad that you have chosen to be a part of this kind of conversation that we've been having these last number of weeks. We started off by having 3 weeks with the Reverend Dr. Steve Larson and hearing his story. And last week, Pastor Lauren and myself, we spent some time together sharing some stories and some insights on Martin Luther and the Reformation. And this week, we get to start my favorite time of year. And I mean that. Most people will laugh at it, but for me, I love this in the church, and it is stewardship season. So look out. So we love stewardship season here at Shepherd of the Hills, at least I do. And because I just think it's such a great time for us to really think about what it means for us to be people of faith, people who trust in God, and then what it means for us to be the church and be a church in mission. So to me, it's one of the most beautiful moments for me is when I see people putting in the treasure chest or the basket, putting their commitment cards for the next year. That's always, it always makes my heart sing when we do that. So this year we have a special theme for us, and the theme for stewardship is together. We're focusing on 3 aspects of together: better together, stronger together, and forward together for the next 3 weekends. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, especially near the end of the conversation. But I brought with me today a very special person indeed, Larry Wikilius, a member here at Shepherd of the Hills. How long have you been here, Larry, at Shepherd of the Hills?
24 years.
24 years, okay. So what kinds of things have you been involved with over the years?
Well, the initial draw was with our kids. So when we joined, we had 3 elementary-aged or even younger kids. So all of the activities around that. My wife Sandy taught Sunday school, and then over time we were involved in CHIRP. Both Sandy and myself are Stephen ministers,
Okay.
And we've both been on council. And I think the list just kind of keeps on going.
Yes,
they know our number and our email.
Well, you've done a variety of things, and whatever ways that you and Sandy involve yourself here is such a blessing to so many, certainly to me in my time of ministry here. It's been a great blessing, so I'm very grateful for that. So one of the things I thought it'd be really fun to do is just to share a little bit of our own kind of stewardship stories, so to speak, because I think, because I believe, honestly, that stewardship is, in many ways, we can talk about it, we hear about it, we might hear a pastor talk about it or do a Bible study around stewardship, but I think it's a lot of a learned behavior, and I think it's a lot of kind of a process of growing with the whole understanding of stewardship. And so I would love to just hear a little bit about kind of when and kind of where you started to learn about stewardship in your own life.
Yeah, so I grew up on a small dairy farm in northern Minnesota, and we were members of local Lutheran church. And as I think about that, we had a continual aspect of stewardship in the family and personally, but we didn't talk about it as stewardship.
Right.
It really was a behavior and just the way our lives were. I mean, I think often of my mom and all the cooking and baking that she did for different things at church and the volunteering that she did there. Every Sunday morning, envelope in the offering plate, as well as Sunday school special offerings, those kinds of things. And but it went more beyond just the church engagement. Even like for my dad as a farmer, he would leave rows of corn for the winter for wildlife or birds or what have you,
wow.
or in the oat field, or so it was stewarding all of God's creation in that case. But at the time, certainly as a kid, you don't think about it in that context.
Right, right.
And so now as I look back at that, my roots go really deep in just that mindset and that concept, and just the way it was as our nuclear family, but then certainly the church family. And if there was ever, a death or farm aspect or other, the community just came together
Right.
to help out
Right.
whatever was needed.
Right, right. Yeah, you probably, as a kid, you probably were just thinking about the fact that you had to get up early and do chores.
Yeah, well, the biggest impact was I always thought my mom baked the best things and took them to church. So I saw them walk out the door rather than get to take advantage of them. But I survived somehow.
You
so.
somehow
I
made it
got
through.
Yeah.
I remember during my seminary years, I would often preach during the summer. I would preach at different rural congregations so that the pastor could have a week off and go on vacation or do whatever. And I always remember going into those little churches, and they would always put up on the wall. They'd always put up their last week's offering. And right below the hymn numbers, that hymn board.
Right.
And below that, they would have their offerings from the previous week. And I remember as I would go into those churches, I was just astounded by the generosity of those farmers. And you think about in those farm families, because you think about, really the gamble that they are taking by, doing their planting and everything else, and they could have one hailstorm come in and level everything and lose everything. So
Right.
you just kind of really appreciate. I really grew to appreciate that kind of mindset that I saw within those rural communities.
Yeah, and very much the community aspect of it.
Yes.
Because everybody can see how the other person's fields are doing, or if there's damage in one area of the town or the county versus another, or just all those aspects. It is a public kind of engagement, but a real coming together.
So that whole stewardship piece of together, really resonates with you.
Very much so.
As you think about that kind of sense of community. I think that sometimes is lost in the conversation, because I think most of the time people feel very anxious when the subject is about money. But if we see it as a collaborative kind of effort, this whole sense of being in community, and we just see how our stewardship just multiplies then. And God, I always like to say that God doesn't work in addition, He works in multiplication. But you see that because that's the beauty and that's the power of community at work.
Right.
So I always also remember as a child, I was taught stewardship at a very early age as well. I didn't, it's one of those things you look back on it and you can kind of see it. At the time, you don't really think about it too much, but every Saturday night, we get ready for church and we'd have those little envelopes, and my mom or dad would give me a dime or a quarter to put in those envelopes, and I was always a little bit frustrated by that because I never got an allowance, so it was like, it was always a little bit of a temptation to take that envelope then to church. There was a part of me that just wanted to take that quarter out and, keep it for myself. But that was just the discipline. It was more than the amount. It was the discipline of doing it, and the fact that it was an important part of what it means to be a part of a church.
And the continuity.
Yep.
Yeah.
In the continuity, for sure. So kind of how has this understanding of stewardship and how's your own kind of, your own seasons of growth, how have you kind of evolved in your whole understanding of stewardship?
I think in a couple of ways. On one aspect, it becomes more personal because you're no longer the child going along with your parents. Now you're charting out your own life and you have children. So it becomes more purposeful, but also really a privilege to continue the learnings early on as in the next generation. And we've moved around some, so we've been exposed to different approaches and different models. And I think through that have been able to see the direct impact that commitment and that stewardship can have. I would say also here at Shepherd of the Hills, one of the big kind of growth aspects is seeing the impact to the larger world. You know, when you're growing up in a small farm community, that's a pretty small kind of world. But here, as we talk about, you know, Haiti and Guatemala and that broader outreach, or even Mariposa here in town, that becomes just a privilege and the opportunity to participate and impact to that level is a whole new level, right? And it's a growth that I think we've really embraced and been excited to be a part of.
Yeah. No, I would agree, and I think it's been really, I think, very important and very effective in really helping to make the connection with people, what they give to what the ministry, what the impact of their giving means to ministry.
And I think the other thing we've seen too is the excitement of, you know, if you just look at Shepherd of the Hills and our staff as an example, we've been able to grow the staff, and you see the diversity and the skill sets. That is such a positive cycle. Because what we're giving and the ability to grow the staff to the way we have and what that staff brings back to the church and what we do is, I mean, it's really exciting to see that. And that's something, you know, we're really able to benefit from.
Right. So, you know, typically churches would have, you know, stewardship committees, and we've kind of shifted gears a little bit, even though it's about stewardship, but we call it a Stewarding for Growth team. And you're doing a phenomenal job of chairing that team, and it's been a really great team that is kind of constantly looking at ways that we can communicate and grow in our own personal and corporate stewardship and that sort of thing. So what has that journey been like for you in chairing that team?
Yeah, so you started me on that journey, I think about 4 years ago, when it was you know, an innocent invitation to coffee, and little did I know. But
be careful when you say yes to a coffee, right? Be
careful when the pastor invites you to coffee, that's right. But it's really been a joy and a growth opportunity for me. I mean, I think we have expanded how we collectively think about stewardship. It's a year-round effort, and it's also a partnership between the staff and congregation. So the team is Pastor Tom, Pastor Lauren, Bill Dawson, Kevin Marlowe, Steve Olson, who's helped us on Capital Campaign, myself, Emily Frankie, Ron Bacon, and Ronnie Pinkert. I think I got everybody. But it's a great mix of staff and lay leadership coming together and thinking about all aspects of stewardship, not just the 6-week kind of push in the fall, but you know, what are other aspects that are important? Communication, you know, where we ask for the support and stewardship, but what's the impact? You know, the mission moments that we've done, the outreach to the congregation, and I think that has really, it's expanded my understanding of stewardship. I hope it's helped the whole congregation, certainly by the commitment and support we've had. I think it has. And it is really an effective model, I think, for where we are and where we're trying to go.
I think what I would totally concur, and this has been in all my years of ministry where I've been a part of stewardship teams, committees. This has been the one that has stood out because, first of all, I think one of the things we've been very good about is being very transparent about how we're doing in our own generosity and how the church is doing, and if there's issues or if there's concerns, that we're not in a kind of a reactive posture, but we're trying to find ways to best respond. which is good, and we can communicate that then more effectively to the congregation. And also just very, very future and forward thinking as well, in terms of what's on the horizon here, what's on the near horizon, what's on the farther horizon here, and what do we need to think about. For instance, one of the areas of stewardship we've not really done a great deal of intentional work in, is in the area of endowment. The endowment fund that is here. So that'll be, as we're looking ahead, that'll be one of the things we start to kind of look at, especially as we go into a capital campaign, presumably next year.
Right. And I think another aspect of that year-round and committed team aspect, we're able to test some things and try some things out, and because the messaging and the communication is so important, and sometimes we try things, they're not that effective. Yeah. Others are much more so. Other things like using Realm and the online giving, and we've evolved this a
QR
lot.
code.
Yeah, QR code.
Yeah.
We've evolved this a lot in a
in
a short period of time, and the congregation has been so supportive of that, and also because of that partnership with staff and lay leadership, I think we see those things more quickly and can respond and correct and move forward. So I think that's been a fun way to push things as well.
I agree. I think for me, part of the evolving learning in my own personal stewardship really happened early in my ministry, when I was a associate pastor at New Hope Lutheran in Missouri City, Texas. And Jeannie was pregnant with Tommy, and after she had Tommy, we were giving at a certain point. We were following the growth giving plan. I never really learned about stewardship in seminary. That's way too practical. But I had to learn it. But fortunately, I worked with a wonderful stewardship pastor, and he really taught me a lot. And so we got on a growth giving plan, and I think we were at Jeannie and I grew to 4%. Our whole goal was to get to 10%, and we've exceeded that now. But at the time, anyway, she had Tommy, our son, and she decided she really didn't want to go back to teaching, and so we made the choice for her to stay at home for at least during that time, and that cut out about 40% of our income, and it was kind of like, well, do we still give at the same place that we've been giving? And so we jumped from 4% to 8% because we stayed right where we were. And I just remember thinking, dear God, you just got to help us, because I don't know if we're going to be able to do that. We just got a new house, and we're just starting our life together, and student loans, all that sort of thing. And you know what? Once we made that commitment, there was never an issue, and so it was just so interesting that through that process, and you putting your trust, in God in that way. It was just, it was such a powerful lesson to me at a very, really important point of my ministry, because right at the beginning, and I think from then on, it emboldened me to be, I think, a pastor who was not afraid of stewardship, not afraid to talk about money, not afraid to talk about priorities, trusting in God, all those important elements that go into it.
Well, and part of what we talk about in the stewardship team is the mission we care about is helping people grow their relationship with Jesus through the gifts of time, talent, and finances.
Right.
And as a community, and that's the overriding drive that we have, and inevitably that those gifts that we are given to give forward makes that faith that much deeper.
Yeah, for sure. So what excites you about kind of the growing stewardship response here at Shepherd of the Hills, what we're looking at in the present, but also in the future?
So certainly the response from the congregation has been so overwhelming, and we've seen this in terms of increase in pledging families, pledging groups, pledging individuals,
Participation in that.
participation, as well as a commitment, and so it's exciting to see that continually happen. But I think also it's that unknown that we don't know what we're going to encounter. I mean, the last couple of years have been so much of those unknowns,
Right.
and yet the commitment of Shepherd of the Hills for our mission, the facility, the campaign to expand, and the courtyard to be able to do Saturday night services, as well as the media outreach for streaming. Those were all things that were put in place. We didn't know how they were going to be used.
Right. Which makes you realize what you do today can impact tomorrow.
So much so. So, the stewardship campaign that we're kicking off now, how is that going to impact and create over the coming years that we don't even know today?
Right.
To me, that's just hit home so many times over the last years. We've gone through this chaos, but through that chaos, the continued commitment of the congregation's been phenomenal.
It's interesting because couple learnings that I've always found remarkable about how we, first of all, we can't outgive God because there's always enough with God. But what's very fascinating to me is when we go into a capital campaign, when we went into our This Matters capital campaign, one of the things that people were really concerned about was how it's going to affect our operational fund, how it's going to affect our mission and ministry fund. Will it take away from our missions? Will it, eat into that fund? And what we've just seen is just the opposite, is that the mission, our mission impact has just continued to grow and to flourish. And so, it's so much about an attitude. Is the attitude scarcity or is the attitude abundance? And there's a big difference.
Yeah, well, you mentioned multiplication. It's almost exponential.
Yes.
When you start to think about how much we've been doing over the past years, and the support for that, and then the doors that opens, and the use of the facilities for the community. Those are other outreaches that we have no idea who we're touching as part of that, but it's a positive, and it creates just those new touch points.
Right. So it's just, I'm so grateful to the congregation for the continued generosity. I think the capacity to continue to grow our generosity is great. And the more we grow, the higher the impact we make for the kingdom of God. And that's ultimately, I call it the field of gold. And because it's just there for us. The mission field is right outside our door. Do you want to just share in kind of closing, Larry, just kind of what the process is for the fall a little bit?
Yeah, so starting this past weekend, we have all the materials available. If you were here this weekend, I think many of you picked them up, but they've also been sent out to home. So if you don't have them, you'll be getting them the next couple of days in mail. There's a wonderful little brochure that's been put together, a super cool logo that Dabney pulled together, which is really neat. And by the way, that's another example of how we've worked as a stewardship team. Dabney's jumped in and worked with us on a lot of the creative and design materials. So the pledge card in the package, we'd like you to fill out pledge card and bring back over the next 3 weeks. I'm sure Pastor Tom, Pastor Lauren will be continuing to talk a bit about the stewardship targets this year, and that theme of together is I think so important. So if you have questions, anything, please feel free to reach out. But that'll be the focus. And I
They
think
go to the website too, right?
And that's right. Thank you. On the website, again, Dabney and the team have been helping add more content and references there. So in addition to the packet, there's a lot of supporting information on the Shep Hills website.
So I'm really excited because Pastor Lauren and I are, for our sermon series during stewardship for the next 3 weeks, we're going to focus on the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. It is a great, great story, and it's a perfect story, I think, for our time right now, especially as we talk about togetherness and stewardship, because it's a story about Nehemiah being called by God to return to his home and to rebuild. Because I feel like that's what we're doing. We're returning and we're rebuilding. And of course, he couldn't do this alone. He did this with the help of others, many others and stuff. So we're going to spend time for the next 3 weeks on different aspects of that story of Nehemiah in the Message series as well. So it should be
Great.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Larry, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation this evening, and thank you for being such a great, you and Sandy for being great stewards in your own life, and thank you for leading our Stewarding for Growth team, and it's been great to have this visit.
Thank you.
Take care, and may God bless you in the rest of your week. And we hope that you will join us next week for another good news as you join Pastor Lauren. Pastor Lauren will be here for that next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock. Please join us. We'd love to have you. Thank you once again.